The flashlight died at exactly 2:13 a.m., and that's when I heard my name. Not shouted, whispered, right against my ear, like someone's lips were an inch from my skin. I spun around with nothing but the dying orange glow of my phone screen, and the headstone stretched out in every direction like teeth in a jaw that had been opened too long. I was 3 months into my job as night caretaker at Hollow Creek Cemetery, a job I took because it paid double what any other night security position offered, and nobody else wanted it. I should have asked why. My hand found the cold iron of a grave fence and gripped it just to feel something solid, because the air around me had gone thick, syrupy, wrong, the kind of silence that isn't empty but listening. Somewhere past the maple trees, a sound like dragging fabric moved across gravel that hadn't been walked on in hours. I did not run. I want to be honest about that. I stood there, frozen, counting my own heartbeat, because some primal part of my brain understood that turning my back on whatever was behind me would be the last mistake I ever made. My phone screen flickered, the battery percentage dropping in real time, 10% gone in what felt like seconds. And in that dying light, I saw my own shadow stretched long across the grass, except it wasn't moving the way I was moving. It was a half second behind, like the darkness itself was catching up to me instead of following me. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I needed to get my shadow back before whatever was borrowing it decided to keep it. It began small, the way these things always do. Caretakers before me had scrawled warnings into the logbook, nothing dramatic, just short lines like, "Don't go past the east fence after midnight," and, "If you hear children, lock the shed and wait." I laughed the first week. The pay was good, the work was simple: check the gates, walk the perimeter, make sure no vandals or teenagers had climbed the fence looking for a thrill. By the second week, I'd started leaving the radio on in the caretaker's shed, just for noise, just so the silence didn't feel so complete. Plot 13 was the one everyone avoided, an unmarked grave from the 1880s that predated the cemetery's official founding records by decades, tucked behind a leaning oak whose roots had cracked clean through the surrounding stones like something underneath had been pushing up for a very long time. The groundskeeper who trained me, an old man named Earl who'd worked the grounds for 40 years and had the kind of weathered calm that comes from either wisdom or exhaustion, told me, without a hint of humor in his voice, that Plot 13 breathes, on cold nights, that the soil rises and falls like a sleeping chest. I thought he was messing with the new guy, the way old-timers do to see if you'll spook easy. Then, on a frost-heavy October night about 6 weeks into the job, I walked my usual loop past the east fence and stopped dead in my tracks, because I watched the ground do exactly that. A slow inhale. A slow exhale. The grass over Plot 13 rising maybe 2 inches and settling back down, rhythmic, patient, like something enormous was sleeping just beneath the surface and didn't appreciate being watched. I stood there for almost 10 full minutes, telling myself it was frost heave, telling myself it was groundwater, telling myself anything that would let me walk away and still call myself a rational person. Earl found me there an hour later, still staring, and he didn't ask what I'd seen. He just nodded slowly and said, "Yeah. Now you know." And I understood, in that moment, that every warning in that logbook had been written by someone just as afraid as I was about to become. After that night, the cemetery started keeping different hours from the rest of the world, or maybe I just started noticing what had always been there. Objects moved between my rounds, flowers I'd cleared away as wilted and dead reappeared fresh on graves that county records showed hadn't had a living visitor in over 30 years. The temperature near the east fence dropped so sharply that my breath fogged in front of my face even during the last humid weeks of summer, a good 15 degrees colder than anywhere else on the property, like stepping through an invisible wall into a different season entirely. I started recording my patrols on my phone, propped in my jacket pocket, partly for proof, partly because I desperately needed someone, anyone, to tell me I wasn't losing my mind. On the recordings, my own voice sounds steady, ordinary, narrating my rounds the way I'd been trained to do for the incident log. But underneath it, faint, almost buried in the static, there's a second voice, layered just beneath mine, repeating the words I just said a half second behind me, like an echo that had learned to speak with its own intention rather than simply bouncing off stone. I played that recording back so many times my hands shook holding the phone, trying to convince myself it was wind interference, feedback, anything explainable. It never was. Then came the dreams, vivid, identical, night after night, of walking toward plot 13 in total darkness while something walked the exact same distance toward me from the other direction, always exactly out of sight, always one turn of a headstone away from being visible. I stopped sleeping properly. I stopped eating properly. Earl noticed the hollows forming under my eyes and told me, gently, that some people last 2 months at Hollow Creek and some people last 2 years, and that the ones who leave in time are the lucky ones. I asked him what happened to the ones who didn't leave in time. He didn't answer, and I didn't ask again. The night I finally worked up the nerve to walk directly to plot 13 after dark instead of skirting around it on my usual route, my flashlight caught something pale moving low between the stones, too low to be a person standing upright, too fast and too fluid to be an animal crawling on 4 legs. I didn't see a face. I only saw it stop, directly across the grave from me, no more than 15 feet away, and turn what should have been its head toward the sound of my own held breath, as though it could hear my heartbeat and was deciding whether it was worth the trouble of crossing the remaining distance between us. I quit 2 nights later, and I want to be clear that I've never gone back, not even in daylight, not even when Earl called months afterward to ask if I'd help train the next hire, walk them through the routes, pass along what I knew. He didn't push when I said no. I think he already understood, better than I did at the time, exactly what that place takes out of a person who stays too long. What I carried out of Hollow Creek wasn't just fear, it was the bone-deep certainty that some ground doesn't just hold the dead, it keeps them half awake, tethered by something far older than the cemetery's official paperwork, older than the town's founding charter, older than anyone currently living could account for. Local historians I spoke with afterward, trying to make sense of what I'd experienced, confirmed what Earl had hinted at for years without ever saying outright. Plot 13 sits atop a burial ground that predates the cemetery's founding by at least a century, unmarked and deliberately excluded from every official survey and map filed with the county. Nobody could tell me who was buried there, or why the original cemetery boundaries had been drawn specifically to include that one grave while ignoring everything else beyond the east fence. To this day, months later, in a house 40 miles from Hollow Creek, I still hear that whispered version of my name when everything else goes quiet at night, and I still don't have an answer for why it knew my voice before I had ever said a single word out loud in that place. I've asked myself 100 times whether I imagined all of it, whether exhaustion and isolation built something out of nothing in my mind. But then I remember the recording, the second voice under my own, and I remember that Earl never once asked me to explain what I saw, because he already knew, and some part of him had been waiting years for someone else to finally see it too. Some places don't let you leave clean. Hollow Creek didn't let me leave clean, and some nights, I'm not entirely convinced it let me leave at all.